side up is next section is section 8. All obligations of the party for payment of the brokers are contained in separate written agreements. Basically saying, guys, is the payments are going to show up in the listing agreement, and it's also going to be represented in the MLS, which is contractually binding. So make sure you pay attention to those, and I'm going to show you where that goes in the contract in just a little bit. Section 9 is the closing date. Again, read all of this, but basically what you need to fill in is the closing. When are you planning to close? Usually a good rule of thumb is about a month out, maybe 6 weeks. You want to make sure you have enough time for your lender to be able to get the documents for your buyer. So don't put a week or two, because lenders don't move that quickly. Typically I start at 6 weeks, so if today is August 27th, if I put in 6 weeks, 1 week, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be October 1st, and then the Friday the 8th. Sometimes I usually like to keep them on Fridays so they can move over the weekend, should everything fund. If you close on a Friday, it might not fund that day, but we can talk about all this later. So let's say we say October 10th. Now if you notice, it does not mean you have to close on October 10th. It means that you have to close on or before October 10th. On or before October 10th. So if everything works out, you can close in September, great. As long as the seller is willing to do this, they are just contractually obligated to sell at least by the 10th. Moving on, section number 10 is possession. This is when does the buyer actually take possession of the property? When does it become theirs? When do they get the keys? When do they get to kick everybody out? Typically, we're going to do this upon closing and funding. Meaning once we've signed all the documents and once the money has moved from one bank to the other. That's closing, signing all the documents, and funding. Now, every once in a while, actually it happens more often than you think, we need to rent the house back to the people. So let's say we close on it and the sellers need to stay for another 2 weeks. Then you would have a temporary residential lease form. That's a totally separate form that we may have to put in there. Sometimes you may get into the house early. There's a lot of different contingencies here, but those are the two basic things. Just know that if you choose according to the temporary residential lease, you're going to have to add a separate form that includes a buyer's temporary residential lease or a seller's temporary residential lease, depending on whoever's staying in the house. So that's important. If you don't want to do that, if you want a clean closing, we go right here and we say upon closing and funding. Section number 11 as well I want to touch on this one. Section number 11 is the special provisions. Under no circumstances are you to write anything in this section without speaking to your broker first. This changes the contract and it has to have contractual verbiage in there. I don't care what anybody else has told you, this is the section where most people get in trouble filling out the contract. So if you've got a special provision or something that you feel like needs to be put into this contract, here is where you would put it. But please do not, under any circumstances, put something in there without talking to your broker first. And the broker is probably going to want to talk to our lawyer as well, just to make sure we're putting things in there correctly. You should be a little bit scared of section 11. There's very little need to ever put anything in there. I know I've probably only done it once. It's not something real important, so make sure you leave that blank. If you think something needs to be in there, please talk to someone, because 9 times out of 10, you don't need to put it in here. There's actually a promulgated form for whatever you're thinking.